All right. So, in the interest of trying to say this, I think I'm going to upload both of those so that people can see everything and decide for themselves. But the problem with the last upload is that I said something about, well, you might be excluded from the group or something like that. And I still have to kind of think about this, but the fact that I can't impose my will upon anyone means that I have to tolerate other people imposing their will or not. And so, like I had said, if someone takes away someone else's freedom, then you can take their freedom away to that extent. So let's look at what I had said about the taxes. So if the United States federal government imposes upon me an income tax, and worse yet, imposes a sales tax on top of that income tax, and also property tax, and etc., tax upon taxes, none of which I can evade. So I have to pay these taxes no matter what I do, which means that that is an imposition of will. And then, given the information that I have, that then necessitates that I do something about that. So I had used North Korea as an example. I don't believe in invasion. So what about criminals? A criminal is someone who has committed an act inside of a legal territory that legal territory has prohibited. So I can't hold someone else accountable for what they've done in their house according to my house's rules. So if somebody else does something in their house that violates my house rules, I can't go to their house and implement my rules in their house. So the exclusion from the group thing can apply because somebody who imposes their will necessarily upon someone else is considered a criminal inside of the group. But in order to make that still stick all the time, that I don't ever impose my will on anyone, I still have to give the criminal three choices after they've been immobilized and arrested and detained and deposited into the holding cell of the brick. At that point, they're then given three choices. They can either work their sentence off, they can rat on someone and get it paid off that way, or they can choose exile. And if they do choose exile, then they get sterilized because they can't take care of themselves, therefore they can't take care of someone else, therefore I'm preventing them from being able to reproduce in the future, which is not the same thing as capital punishment, but it is pretty severe. It means that a person can only retain their reproductive rights if they choose to work off the sentence that they incurred by committing a prohibited act within the legal territory of the empire, which has the movement. So the proper action is not to retaliate against the United States government because the United States government is foreign. So it is outside of the legal territory of the empire and therefore cannot be held legally liable for its acts, which would be considered crimes inside the empire, but being that the United States, is necessarily outside the empire, then we can't impose that law upon it. Even though were those acts to be committed inside the empire, they would result in criminal action. Given that the United States is outside that territory and therefore outside that jurisdiction, makes the United States government exempt from that. And that's basically what I was saying as far as conflict resolution. If there's a conflict and it can't be resolved through debate, which I might engage the government in debate if I felt like it was worthwhile to do, I might lobby the United States government from time to time and have people persuade or even vote en masse to change the laws to more closely approximate alignment with the empire or with imperial values, being that you don't impose your will upon anyone else to the degree that you don't ever reduce someone's choices to less than 3. So if there is a tax, like I said, I believe that it should be prohibited except if it's applied to sin tax or some other specialized tax that has nothing to do with what is necessary to survive. Therefore, there cannot be a property tax because I need property to survive. I can never live on the street and just expect that to be okay. I can't avoid that tax. So therefore, it's a crime inside the empire. Outside the empire, it just, it's whatever the country says, and then they operate internally, they are in charge. So inside their legal territory, their legal law plays jurisdiction. That's their house, their rules. Go over to my house, cross the pond, and you've got a totally different set of rules. But that's not to say that I can invade their house and impose my will upon them any more than they can impose their will upon me. So I have to be allowed to exit the United States, which I am. So as long as I can, then that will be fine. But I also can't break any of their laws. During this movement, that's one of the other things about this movement, is that it is not an illegal movement. It's not a terrorist movement. It does not seek to coerce or impose its will upon anyone else. Its purpose is to not impose its will on anyone else, which is to say that it allows everyone else to come to their own conclusions, even if those conclusions are to go against what it thinks is right. And that's what's necessary to coexist in a diverse and, yes, divisive ecosystem of competing worldviews, ethical guidelines of what is and what isn't good, true, and real. And how we define what is good, true, and real is the reference frame that we can then use to determine what we're looking at inside of that reference frame, whether it's a theory or whatever we're considering. So, whatever we're discerning. So, the way that this movement is going to operate is that it will must abide by the legal laws inside the legal territories to which those apply. But with the eventual goal of building an empire physically, geographically outside the limits of the legal laws of the United States, which extend 200 nautical miles beyond the shoreline or the beachhead, or the coast line of North America. That's and I think that applies to every country, if I'm not mistaken. So as long as there isn't a shoreline within 200 nautical miles, I can do whatever the fuck I want. As far as, coming up with any constitutional laws that I want, the imperial laws that we've been talking about could then be implemented, and there would not be any more income or sales tax. There would be a sin tax, for sure. There might be other taxes too, but those taxes would always be avoidable, and they would be on things that are not directly related to survival necessities. No taxes on any property, no taxes on any food, no taxes on any water, no taxes on any air, and no taxes on any contraception. So if you're going to buy it, it's not free, but it can't be taxed, because the last thing that I need is for people to stop using contraceptions. So the point of distinction there, the line, the defining line, is all about what is internal to the legal territories. And these have to be physically, objectively measurable. So they can't be pie in the sky, universal law over every bit of existence equally. That can never be tolerated inside the empire. There will always be someone who wants to do that. Ultimate power extended throughout eternity, blah, blah, blah. But the empire and anything that I would try to represent would not do that, would not represent that. That would go totally against what the empire stands for, which is to never impose your will upon someone else. If you try to make your will ubiquitous, it necessarily makes everybody else have to follow your will. So in other words, I don't believe that it's possible for any person to make every single being in existence agree to anything. I think that we are so diverse that there's not a single position that we could think of that everybody can agree on. There will always be some dissent somewhere. And if we don't hear it, it simply hasn't been voiced or it hasn't been found yet. But there is some dissent somewhere. There's always another way of looking at things. So if I don't want to impose my will upon anyone else, then the empire can't impose its will upon the United States or upon any other legal entity inside of their legal boundaries. And the empire has to have its own physical, objectively measurable boundaries, which I think should be, again, 200 nautical miles from the shoreline of its land mass. I guess it's not really land, but it's artificial islands. And those artificial islands are going to be very difficult to build because they are going to have mile-long chains that anchor them to the seafloor, because most of the seabed in the Atlantic Ocean is pretty goddamn deep, and that's going to require very long chains, but it's okay. We can build very long chains in the 3 0 cities that I'm going to build in America, but those cities are going to be what I call sunlight districts, which means that as they're not really part of the empire, they're vassal states to America, but their systems are as close to imperial structures as legally possible, permitted by the United States. So anytime that there's a conflict in between the imperial constitution or even the Federate constitutions specifically, and the United States government wins, so that we don't ever break the United States law. Even if the United States law changes, we have to change with those laws, so that these zeroth cities are just like the name sounds. They are not really considered to be part of the empire. They're not actually cities of the empire. They're not imperial. Those are recruiting depots that are actually part of the United States legally, and they're going to pay United States levied taxes and all that stuff. Even though I don't believe in it, I have to pay it because I'm inside their geographic limits. So anything that I build inside their geographic limits, I have to abide by their laws. Just like as if they were going to build something in my empire, they would have to abide by my laws. So that's how it's going to get played. So that's how this revolution won't ever get stopped, is because it's not violent and it's not criminal. And as long as I don't have any of those problems, I think we should be fine. Now all it is it's just gaining traction. But I'm not that worried about that, because I believe in my ideas so much that I think that once I get this implemented, that people will see its merit and that they'll just come in droves, because it will speak for itself. If I build it well enough, I shouldn't have to sell it at all. It should just sell itself. People should be coming from all over trying it out. Oh, wow, look at this thing. And it should be the greatest thing since sliced bread. People should want to come to it. So in the interest of trying to determine, what is and isn't ethical according to imperial standards, to impose your will upon someone else means that you reduce their choices, their viable choices, to less than 3. And the way that you measure those choices, that's going to be a little bit more complex, but it's still pretty simple, and it is they have to be independent from each other. So you can't say that, well, you could either get a cookie or you could have nothing. Like nothing isn't a viable choice. It's not really a choice. It's the absence of a choice. It's just nothing. So that's not really a choice. So, and that gets rid of most ultimatums right there. You can't do an ultimatum because an ultimatum is two choices. So two choices is you either do this or else this will happen to you. That's an ultimatum. And what that means is that you have two choices. You can either do option A or option B. And the reason that that isn't really two choices is because option A is always better than option B, or option B is always better than option A. There's always one of them that's better off than the other one. That's why it's used. It's used to force someone into a position through the illusion of giving them another chance, but they don't have that chance. They only have the one, which is the best lesser of two evils. If they have to choose between these two, then they're going to make a quote unquote choice, which is very viscerally felt as being forced upon the subject that's making it, because they're choosing between the lesser of two evils. They're not making a real choice. They're being confined. And that always happens when you reduce their choices to less than three. So that's an ultimatum. That's two choices. You can also reduce someone's choices to one choice, which is that they're just going to do something. That it's basically a compulsion to do something. Or it's a prohibition against doing anything except standing there or retaining your own location, just sustaining things as they are. Zero choices is when you're dead. That's when you don't have any choices at all. You don't even get the one choice. You don't even get to survive through that zero choice. You just end. So that's the scale of evil. So the most evil thing to do then is to reduce someone's choices to zero, which is to kill them. The second most evil thing to do to someone is to reduce their choices to one, which is to rape them or to enslave them, where they just will do this thing or they'll die. And the reason that we, again, don't count the or dying choice is because it's not a choice, because it's not viable. Viability means that the person should be able to survive it. And independence means that it can't be red versus blue. It can't be, well, you can either have a strawberry or vanilla ice cream, but you're getting ice cream either way. If it's too similar like that, then it's not really independent. Independent means that you have a totally different subjective state, and you would still, make this choice. So it would be like, regardless of how you felt and regardless of what your preferences were, you get this choice. So that could be like a career choice. It could be an educational choice. It could be a fashion choice. But there's nothing external that would tell you that this is better than anything else. It's just like any other genre. I mean, it's independent enough that you could tell it apart from any of the other ones because that's why you would choose it. But it's not above or below any of the other alternatives as a peer that it's with. So there's no best or worst choice. It's not like that. It's just what you personally prefer or like, what speaks to you or resonates to you. So that's how choices are made. And if it isn't like that, if you end up in a position where things are quantitatively or objectively better or worse, those are not choices because those are objectively better or worse. So you would have to, and that goes back to survivability. If you are looking at survivability, you're looking at the objective necessities to continue making more choices. You have to have a body that's surviving in order to make choices. You have to be alive. You have to survive. So if a choice leads to death, or if a choice leads to the cessation of all future choices by necessity, that isn't a choice. That's the lack of a choice. That's an impossibility. And everybody should always have at least three choices at all times. Again, I don't try to extend this theory too far. So does that then mean that death itself is a crime that God should be ashamed of or something like that? And no, I don't make that distinction. it doesn't necessitate that your choices were reduced to less than 3 unnecessarily. It is necessary to die, because if you didn't ever die, then there wouldn't be room enough for everyone else. There would only be room for one type of person that would just never die. If everybody didn't die and everybody kept getting born, there wouldn't be enough room to sustain us all. We would just be absolutely crawling all over the walls. There would not be enough room. We would eat ourselves into starvation, and then we would just starve and starve and starve and starve and starve, and there wouldn't be anything to eat for eons and eons and eons, because we can't die. And so then, and we can't kill each other to eat each other either. So we're just sitting there starving and starving and starving. And that's it. So those kinds of scenarios are impossible. So that's why we don't try to follow them. We don't go anywhere near them. If that's the destination, if that's a necessary destination, then we don't go anywhere along that path. So anything that necessarily leads to that, we avoid. If we're part of the movement. Now, in order to get kicked out of the movement, what I was saying there is that there's going to be hierarchical positions of power. And if somebody abuses or violates the law, then of course they're not going to be able to serve their office. Just like the president of the United States, if he was caught with Scarface cocaine on his desk or something like that, he'd get kicked out. So, it's the same thing there. Now, he could still be a citizen after he serves his time. He would still be considered a citizen of the United States, but he just wouldn't be able to serve office. And it's the same thing in my scenario, too. It's the same thing. You can always be a citizen. A person technically stops representing the movement only during an act which necessitates the reduction of someone's choices to less than 3. The artificial reduction of someone's choices to less than 3. Again, if something is necessary, like to die, it is necessary to die, then that's not considered to be a violation. So that you can't blame creation or God or existence for death. It's not criminal then to die. It's not a criminal act. So the reason that I bring that up is because, again, this is a legal law. It's not to be taken religiously. It's not to be taken extended beyond just the limits of legality. Because when you do, it looks like that, and it's weird. So anyway, if a person does reduce someone's choices to less than 3, that can be objectively proven. And if it is proven that has been done, then that's considered an imperial crime. That's something that would be considered a crime regardless of where they are inside the legal territories of the empire. Whether it's in the Confederation of Concordia, whether it's in the Federation of Nil, Federation of Federation of Unum, or something like that. I still haven't come up with the other 2 names. And Federation of Being, that's the Democratic Federation. Regardless of if you're in any of those territories, it would always be illegal to impose your will upon someone else. So there will not be any flat taxes that you can't avoid, like property taxes or food taxes or sales taxes or income taxes or death taxes or any of that stuff. It's just taxes that you can avoid paying so that you could live your entire life, you could survive your entire life without ever paying 1 dime into it. And those are the taxes that will be levied. That way, if you don't want to pay taxes, you don't have to. But if you want something extra, then you're going to have to pay us so that we'll give you the extra stuff. But the survival is yours. You always have the right to survive. The civilization, the government, does not have the right to take that away from you through taxing. So it has no right to tax you. But like I said, that's not to say that the United States government should be overthrown because it does that. It's just saying that if it did that inside the legal territories of the empire, it would be considered a crime. It isn't to be considered a crime because it legalized that, and people choose to live under its regime. the reason that I feel like that's almost not even worth saying is because there really isn't anywhere for people to go that would get them to a place where they don't have to pay taxes. There's nowhere on earth that I know of where you don't have to pay some taxes. Even in Florida, even though it has no state tax, it does have federal taxes. It has all kinds of them because it's part of the, United States legal territories. So that jurisdiction applies. Now, once the empire is built, then people will have a choice. And so it will be absolutely proven then that, yes, it is a choice for those people to remain within the boundaries of the United States and therefore pay their taxes, and therefore it's not a crime. But until then, I can sympathize with some people feeling like there really isn't anywhere for someone to go where they can have their survival needs met, but yet not taxed. So, unfortunately, I can't come up with any places on Earth that you can do that on yet. But I still really don't feel that overthrowing the United States government is going to do anyone any good. So I'm just not going to do that.